Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this Area Planning Subcommittee South meeting. Before we start, I'll read the webcasting introduction. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of repeated viewing or any other use by such third parties. If you are seated in the lower public seating area, it is likely that the recording cameras will capture your image, and this will result in the possibility that your image will become part of the broadcast. This may infringe your human and data protection rights, and if you wish to avoid this, you should move to the upper gallery. Thank you. Just a few introductions this evening. I'm chair, I will be a voting chair. Vice chair is Councillor Smruti Patel. Democratic Services are represented by Laura Kerman, and planning with Jerry Godden and other speakers are on Zoom, and our webcasting officer is at the end there. Item 2 on the agenda is advice to public and speakers attending the council, and that's available for you on pages 5 to 8. Moving on to item 3, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies at this meeting?
Apologies have been received from Councillor Joggia, Murray, Lyon, Rackham, Risby and Brooks.
Thank you. Any others from the floor? Councillor Heap?
It's not an absence, but I think Councillor Gavitt is struggling to get here on time.
Thank you. Item 4, declarations of interest. To declare interests in any item on this agenda from the members. I have Councillor Pond.
Chairman, yes. 231 Fencepiece Road. One of the objectors is an acquaintance of mine. It isn't a close acquaintance. Haven't discussed the matter with him, so I shall stay and vote.
Thank you. Councillor Sunga.
Thank you, Chairman. Item number 10 is a pecuniary interest. I shall not be voting. I shall be leaving the chamber. Thank you.
Any other declarations? Thank you. Okay, item 5, the minutes of the previous meeting on the 27th of April, pages 9 to 16 of the report. Is everybody happy with the minutes as recorded? Can we take them as agreed? Thank you. Item 6, any other business?
No other business.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry.
Just, I think we should note that tonight is the last meeting which will be attended by Jerry Godden as our Senior Planning Officer, and I'd like to thank him for all his attention and hard work over the last, how many years, Jerry?
12 as committee.
Yeah, indeed, so perhaps that could be noted.
Thank you.
Indeed, I was going to close the meeting with it, but it's a good point to do it. Thank you. Item 7 is the Epping Forest District Council Planning Policy Briefing Note, which is a briefing note, nothing more for this meeting. So we move to item 8, site visits, to identify and agree requirements for formal site visits. Are there any on these applications? It appears not, thank you. We will move on to the first planning application, which is EPF 1182/18, land west of Froghall Lane, Chigwell, Essex. We now have the officer's report. Thank you.
Good evening. Can the chamber hear me?
Yep, absolutely.
Fantastic. And can the presentation screen be seen just before I kick off? Oh, fantastic.
Cool. Not at this moment. We're just working on it.
Yes. No.
Yes?
No.
Item 9?
No.
Yes. Oh, no, on there.
It's not. It's changing on my screen, but not on here for some bizarre reason. Let's try again.
I think you should go.
Sorry, Juma, are you going to be presenting this, as in moving the slides?
Yes. I'm sharing. Yes, I'm sharing
okay,
my
that's
screen.
why I can't do it. In that case, I'll let you do it. Yeah.
Okay. I'm currently sharing my screen, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, your screen is visible.
Fabulous. Thank you. Good evening, members. The first item, item number 9 on the agenda this evening, bearing reference EPF stroke 1182 stroke 18. Majority of members will recall that this application was deferred for decision in October 21 to allow for updates to the financial viability assessment and the information supporting that, as well as to redress residual concerns relating to sustainability and ecology stroke landscaping. The addendum report, published as a supplementary item to the main agenda, should be read in tandem with the original report, which appears as item 9 in the main pack. Before I provide an overview of the main planning issues and the key updates since the last time it was brought to committee, members, and particularly those that are new to this committee, may consider it helpful to refresh minds with regard to the proposals. So, the current application is a hybrid application, meaning that proposals are comprised of 2 components, 2 elements, which respectively seek permission as follows. The first part is full planning permission for 105 assisted living homes, integrated care facilities comprising wellness centre and restaurant, landscape and associated infrastructure and services. The second part, which is only an outline with all matters reserved, is the extension of the existing Chigwell Cemetery. You'll be able to see here, edged in red, is the application site. This also comprises the outline aspect as well, which is obviously the extension to the proposed extension to the Chigwell Cemetery. The other slide here is obviously just an aerial view. And the third is obviously looking at accessibility and transport connections in the local area to the application site. The total site measures approximately 2.8 hectares and is located to the west of Foghall Lane, which runs along here. And it's between Chigwell Cemetery, which is to the north, Woodlands Road to the south, and Mount Pleasant Road to the east. These are site photos, just quickly, just they're internal site photos showing obviously looking west, east, and over the valley. This is the view along Manor Road, which runs, and this is just typically identifying where the application sits in that scene, obviously where the shops are, as well as obviously the road. These are Woodland Road and Mount Pleasant Road, with the respective access points into the site from those respective roads themselves. The adopted development plan currently designates the site as Greenbelt land, although the emerging submission version local plan has indicated it for release to provide for the district's specialist housing needs. The proposed scheme is wholly comprised within a cluster of 5 blocks labelled A to E, which you can see here, A, B, C, D, E, within which on-site recreation, health and related facilities for its future residents and occupiers are also incorporated. The blocks are contained within the lowest part of the site to the east. The residential blocks are each comprised of 4 floors with a maximum height, and in total with apologies. The residential blocks are each comprised of 4 floors and accommodates 87 2-bedroom units and 18 1-bed units. There are 4 unit type configurations as shown here in this slide as well. These are obviously images of the elevations, development, obviously those 5 blocks. So this is A to C. And D, buildings B and D, which is similar. So this is building E, in fact. This is the site section that runs from west to east across the site. So obviously you can see along here, this will be Mount Pleasant Road. This is obviously the proposed development. And this will be obviously Woodlands Road. Again, this is more a longer view going further to the east. And this is also another section showing obviously Woodlands Road to the south and also going to the north. The blocks are arranged around a central landscaped area. I should just come back to here, with a car parking and linked footpaths. The level of parking provision has been reduced to 85 spaces in total from 132 spaces originally proposed, which represents a 35% reduction. There are two accesses, which I will just try and scroll back to. There are two accesses into the actual site. They are existing accesses, as mentioned. The first, whichever way around which you want to look at it, the first access off of Woodlands Road is the main resident visitor access point, and the secondary access is obviously off of Mount Pleasant Road, which is for emergency stroke service access only. Turning to just also wanting just to give you an indication of typical facades and external materials within development. This is where the proposed blocks A and C will accommodate the wellness and the on-site residence facilities. And this is a zoomed in on enlarged version showing those, the restaurant and the wellness area within those blocks. The planning issues, turning to these main issues for consideration by our members and then discussed in the actual reports provided. In summary, officers have concluded as follow on the different matters. Greenbelt and specialist housing needs. The inappropriateness and resulting harm caused in the openness of the Greenbelt has been considered in detail, identifying the key material considerations that would on balance amount to very special circumstances and would ultimately make the development in this respect acceptable. There is the very special circumstances are, in brief, there is an evidence need for specialist housing for the elderly in the district, which is somewhat higher in Epping than elsewhere. This evidence need has actually been translated into the making of the site allocation, CHIG R4, which in itself and its supporting planning policy have not been opposed through the local plan examinations that took place in 2019. There is also a long-term need for expanding Chigwell Cemetery, particularly in the absence of a lack of wider provision in the submission version local plan or the infrastructure development plan, as well as acknowledging the opportunity this presents, as a developer would not normally consider it necessary to provide for any land for its expansion otherwise. Design and layout. The specialist housing element of the proposals as built in its built form is well designed and laid out. The architectural aesthetic is modern and bold, yet coherent and simple in overall scale and form. The landscape setting within which development will be integrated will provide a helpful transition between it and its immediate built and unbuilt surroundings. The cemetery element is in outline only, where design and layout matters will be considered further at a reserved matters application stage should members be minded to grant planning permission. Sustainability, ecology and stroke landscaping. With regard to the additional matters raised by members at the October 21 committee in respect to sustainability, officers are now satisfied that the development design would exceed current building regulation requirements, as well as committing to go further to achieving the council's net zero ambitions by 2050. In terms of ecology, the development also takes sufficient steps to support and enhance the existing and future biodiversity of the surrounding landscape through thoughtful landscaping interventions. Highways and car parking. Essex Highways maintain no objection in relation to the proposed development, specifically in relation to its safety and operation of its junctions onto Woodlands and Mount Pleasant roads. They've also not objected to the reduced parking levels. Officers consider the reduced parking levels achieves an equitable balance between perceived needs and its accessible location. The likelihood of on-street parking is considered limited, as explained in the original report to committee. That's found on page 35 and 36. Planning conditions have been included also to restrict access use from Mount Pleasant Road for emergency service vehicles only. That's also reflected in condition 6 on page 19 of the original report. In terms of the impacts on the Epping Forest Special Area Conservation, in accordance with the interim air pollution mitigation strategy and the interim approach to managing recreational pressures, and also their associated planning policies, DM2 and DM22, significant effects of development on this Act can be adequately mitigated, subject to securing the relevant financial contributions via Section 106, including planning conditions that directly and indirectly secure reductions in car usage and reliance, and also those associated impacts. In terms of viability in affordable housing, so members will also note this was one of the key reasons for the deferral back in October 21. Officers have received obviously the updated financial viability assessment, which has been rigorously vetted by the officers and its expert viability consultants. You will note from obviously the published report that the scheme is now able to support an off-site contribution of £3 million towards the council's affordable housing building programme. Although the applicant maintains this is strictly on a without prejudice basis. Full details of the negotiations between the council, assisted by our own independent viability advisors, as well as the applicants, is set out in the addendum report on page 7. Officers consider that the level of contribution negotiated represents a significant improved planning benefit to the council when compared to the original reported position in October 21, and also the maximum reasonable amount that could be realistically secured. Accordingly, officers recommend that the affordable housing contribution is supported. The other planning benefits that members should be minded, should note, should they be minded to grant planning permission this evening, is that the scheme would deliver additional benefits, which are summarised on page 25 of the original report, including also there are subsequent amendments to those in the addendum. For convenience, those changes or those amendments relate to the contribution that was originally sought for the Chigwell Hopper bus being substituted for local sustainable transport measures. And an additional, I should say, rather than planning benefit, but an actual control or an obligation is to restrict the ground rent, the ability of the applicant to, of the future operators to charge ground rents on the site. Overall, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions and a Section 106 to secure the planning benefits reported. Should an approval be given the application, this evening, it is subject to referral to the National Planning Case Workers Unit, as a proposal represent a departure from the council's adopted local plan policies currently in specific relation to Greenbelt. The officer presentation is now over. I will also just leave on the screen here some of the artists' impressions of the development, which was submitted as part of the application pack. There we are. My presentation is now complete. Thank you.
Thank you for that well-informed consultation on this. It's a hard one to proceed. We have two speakers on this. First, on behalf of the Parish Council, Selina Jeffcoat. Sorry, can I just mention everybody has 3 minutes when they're speaking from the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. We're pleased to see improvements in this application. The revised viability statement has established the land value at 900,000, not the nearly 5 million first used by the developer. Thus, the affordable contribution has risen from 488,000 to 3 million. However, we should remember this is an application for 105 flats, and Epping's own affordable housing policy requires that 40% of these should be built as affordable. We doubt that 3 million is enough to purchase land and build 42 homes anywhere in Essex. Certainly the first-time buyers and essential workers in Chigwell won't be seeing any. We're pleased the build on paper seems to be sustainable enough to contribute towards the council target of net zero by 2050. However, given this is a completely new build, it has to be asked why 2030 standards are not being required. We still have concerns. The unnecessary access from Mount Pleasant Road. If it's permanently locked, then what good is it for emergency vehicle access? If not locked, anyone and everyone will use it. The parking. We say it again. The submission version of the local plan points out that cutting car parking does not reduce car ownership. Policy T1 is not yet a valid policy in the local plan. Until Epping Forest have carried out transport assessments area by area, all new developments have to meet Essex parking standards. That means this proposal should have over 200 parking spaces, not the 85 it currently has. I know this is what highways have suggested, but our own local plan says highways are wrong. This is a big development on Greenbelt, and we're still failing to see the special circumstances. The land for the cemetery isn't. One of the few uses for Greenbelt can be cemeteries, and we have plenty of capacity already there. The health contribution agreed in 2018 at 24,000, frankly, is poor. As you know, we don't have a doctor's surgery in Chigwell, and the pressures this will create are significant. We have several luxury residential care units loitering unsold in the area already, so demand is questionable. A big concern is the potential change of use. We saw at Woolston Manor the holiday lets change to flats, despite a planning condition limiting occupancy to golf club users. Planners say that this site wouldn't get residential use, but a change of use application is a lot more difficult to rebut than a planning application. I'm not confident that the proposed planning condition is enforceable. We are concerned, given the large number of unsold residential care units already in Chigwell, that a change of use for some flats here may be applied in the future. The terms of lease of the flats sold may have an age restriction, but leases can be altered as units are sold, and who, other than the freeholder, will be enforcing this? On the principles of the parking failing to meet policy of Essex parking standards, not sufficient special circumstances to justify development in Greenbelt, insufficient contribution to the health infrastructure, still, I'm afraid, insufficient affordable housing contribution, and occupancy only limited by a potentially unenforceable planning condition, Chigwell Parish Council continue to object.
Thank you. The second speaker is the applicant's agent, Jamie Sullivan. He's actually here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm very pleased to be here tonight, and I'd like to compliment your officers for producing a very thorough report which covers all of the key issues. I'd like to start, if I may, by talking about the scheme a little more widely. This would be a high-quality development which would deliver significant community benefits on a site which has already been identified by the local authority and originally the parish council. Rangewood Villages are one of the leading operators of integrated retirement communities in the country, providing well-regarded later living environments where older residents can live life to the full, secure in the knowledge that help, care and support is available 24/7. They have a track record of creating vibrant, stimulating, fun and integrated communities, and with our ageing population and strain on the NHS, this is one of the ways the country can help to tackle the key issues we face as a society. And just to address one of those points we heard there about a potential for a change of use in the future, Rangeford only deliver older persons accommodation. That's their sole purpose as the operator, and there would be no chance of a change of use at a future date. Moving back to the specifics of the application, we are returning after the decision to defer the scheme previously. We've sought to follow the advice of members and update reports and answer all of the previous points raised. There are two key and very positive outcomes from this. One is the confirmation that we'll be delivering a net zero carbon scheme, and second is the increased offer of affordable housing up to £3 million. We understand that this is the largest single off-site affordable housing contribution in recent times in the district by quite some distance. In addition, there are some other final matters I'd like to highlight. First, this is the only site allocated in the local plan for older persons' care and accommodation. It is essential that this scheme is brought forward to offer meaningful choice to older people and meet the needs identified by the council themselves. Retirement and care communities like this demonstrably improve people's lives and reduce the burden on support services like GP surgeries, the NHS and mental health teams. Second, the site provides a 1 acre extension to Chigwell Cemetery in line with a request from the Parish Council. Finally, as the construction sector starts to gear up again, this developer is eager to start on site, and it can be delivered in one phase, meaning early contributions to housing delivery, providing jobs in the construction industry and also to businesses locally. Furthermore, these schemes are proven to release larger former family homes and stimulate the housing market. I commend the scheme to you, and I'm ready, alongside the CEO of Rangeford, to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Barlow is one of the councillors for the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. There are just a few things that I'd just like to add on to what Councillor Jeffcoat asked earlier. You also said that you're going to substitute sustainable transport or something to do with transport in replace of the Chigwell bus. What does that mean, please?
You want me to answer that one, Chair?
I think we don't normally ask questions up, but please go ahead and if it makes it shorter.
So, yes, obviously there was a very sensible suggestion last time around that we were making a contribution to the hopper bus and the hopper bus didn't exist anymore. We'd always said, well, let's identify another alternative scheme. The money is paid to the council to give them the option to spend it on sustainable transport accessibility, and that will be left open within the Section 106, should you grant permission and instruct your inspectors, your officers to do that. But if you're looking for an example, the really good suggestion that was made by members was why not spend that money on actually improving accessibility and a lift at Grange Hill Station, and we're very happy for the money to be spent on that. It seems like a very sensible way to use that funding.
Thank you. Councillor Barlow, did you want to come back?
Yes. I'm sorry about that. Also, regarding the cemetery, we did actually mention last time that we've got about between, I think it's 30 to 50 years worth. We don't actually need to have any expansion on the cemetery.
I'm sorry, you can't address questions to the speakers. We can address them to the officer.
Okay, so sorry, I was looking in the wrong direction. Yes, so we did mention last time that the expansion of the cemetery actually was something that really wasn't required. And nobody's actually come back to us on that point. Again, it's been addressed again to be included in the plan. It was something which we did mention last time, that it just wasn't something that was required.
Okay. Sorry,
yeah, Mr. Ahmed would be the one to answer that.
Yeah, the need for obviously the cemetery itself has actually been covered in the original report itself. If I may just briefly summarise, the member is correct in terms, councillor is correct in terms of the fact that there is sufficient capacity for the next few years for the existing cemetery itself. However, the current, or the the submission version local plan doesn't actually make any provision for cemetery growth in the actual district itself, and nor does the infrastructure development plan. And, you know, generally speaking, the provision itself should be seen as a benefit of the actual scheme in itself to deliver, and this will probably be the only opportunity as a result of this potential scheme to obviously unlock that and actually provide that additional provision within Chigwell. But it wouldn't necessarily just be for Chigwell users. Of course, it would be for the wider district.
Yeah, I still don't agree with that. I think we've got plenty of space in Chigwell. We've got about 3 or 4 cemeteries, so I don't actually agree with what you've just said. And secondly, you know, the infrastructure, we keep going on about it again. Councillor Jeffcoat's mentioned it again this evening. Would it not be better to have money put into, you know, some infrastructure, because we're building more and more in Chigwell. We only have one doctor, well, actually we don't have a doctor surgery in Chigwell. We're overutilising GP surgeries that are local, and people are actually struggling to get appointments at the moment. And if you're talking about a home where it's going to be elderly people, then we're going to need better infrastructure.
Thank you. Councillor Sungar.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a couple of questions, if I may, please. My first question is surrounding the access point, the service and emergencies access from Mount Pleasant Road. I know if I was living on Mount Pleasant Road and I was told that a new development was going to go up and there was going to be some sort of an access for the site, I'd want to know, quite rightly, Councillor Jeffcott pointed out, that is it going to be locked gates, etc. But more importantly, what I would like to know is what's the chances of that site being made available for just normal use? Will there be a legal agreement put in place? Perhaps Mr. Godden can actually confirm that, just so that in future, if planning permission was to be granted, we can say that cannot be a route into the site. It can only be for service and emergency vehicles. If I could have that addressed, then I've just got one other point after that. Thank you.
I think Mr Ahmed might be better placed to see if that's one of the conditions.
I can pick up the point about the emergency stroke service vehicle access. Of course, as I mentioned in the presentation, that there is a restriction within the report proposed. I think it's condition number 6, which obviously suggests to secure that. What members also ought to acknowledge is the fact that there is an existing access point onto that road. In terms of obviously its control, as I say, the planning condition recommended would seek to restrict its use for those specific types of vehicles or those events, i.e. in the need of an emergency vehicle to come to site. In terms of actually how it's actually controlled, we don't actually currently have that detail, but of course, you know, if members were minded to obviously approve the application, I'm sure a condition to that effect could be imposed to actually ask how that access could be controlled and, you know, its use monitored for specifically those points. But as I say, there is a condition at the moment that restricts it for specifically those two uses, or in the event of those two uses, i.e. for service vehicles, generally servicing of the site, and also in the event of an emergency. Picking up on obviously any alternative uses coming forward, we can only really consider the applications before us this evening. Of course, I can't, you know, preclude anything else coming forward in future. You know, we can only consider what's before us at this stage. In terms of actual planning controls, in terms of preventing any other types of uses, I think it's quite clear that, you know, the emerging local plan and its site allocation quite clearly states that it is for a specialist housing need, and in effect, the actual use that's been proposed this evening does fall within that definition. As I say, it's not for general residential needs or anything like that. This is strictly for a specialist housing needs, and that's, you know, adequately covered within the actual site allocation in the emerging plan.
Thank you. Just a quick one, if you are coming back, Councillor Sunday.
Chairman, thank you very much for allowing me to come back. I think perhaps Mr. Ahmed, I think, has probably missed the thrust of my point here, is that at the moment, yes, we're determining an application based on service and emergency access. However, could we, if planning permission was to be granted, and I'm saying if, then can we have a restrictive covenant through a legal agreement to say that could only be for that purpose only? And second point is, on page 27, the point number 2 is 52,500 contribution towards the Chigwell Hopper bus. I'm pretty certain that figure was a lot higher in the previous application, or am I wrong in that? If that could be confirmed. Thank you.
I could answer the first question about a covenant. Frankly, the planning condition at 6 is far stronger than any covenant in dealing with that, because to breach that would be a planning condition, and you'd also have to put in a variation to remove it, should you wish to do so. The second one about the money, I'll pass back to Mr. Ahmed.
I'm certain the actual level of the amount of contribution that was mentioned is still the same contribution, but I'd need to basically go back over the files to double check to see if that is the figure. I don't recall it being too different to the one that the Councillor Sung has mentioned.
Thank you. If you could come back later when you've had a look at that, that would be helpful. Thank you. Can we go to Councillor Owen, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I had a question on the affordability. I'm a bit unclear because I've heard quite a few different numbers in the report and then from the speakers. Can someone confirm exactly what is on offer? And if we approve it, is that the final offer in terms of could it go lower or not?
Mr. Ahmet, can you help us on that?
Yes. So in terms of the negotiations as a result of the updated financial viability information provided by the applicant in January, we concluded that the development would be able to afford, however, on a without prejudice basis, a sum of 3 million towards affordable housing. We have considered, there was a lot of to and fro, as you'd expect in these types of negotiations in terms of obviously the key factor here which was picked up by the parish was obviously the benchmark land value that was being used, and that was a significant shift on the part of the applicant in terms of our agreeing or closely aligned with our own analysis, which enabled for the uplift or the significant uplift to be achieved, amongst obviously other things, but that was really the key coup, should I call it, for the council itself. So the actual sum contribution will be towards affordable housing, £3 million, and that will be secured should obviously members themselves wish to, be minded to obviously approve the scheme this evening. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Councillor Pond.
Chairman, I was quite impressed by the artist's impressions, which struck me as somewhere between Finchingfield and Tallinn. They're almost lyrical in their presentation. So I've no objection to the design. I think the architects and the artists have done quite a good job. What I think is wrong with this application is that it's in the wrong place. It's plumb in the middle of the green belt. I haven't heard any compelling argument that there are very special circumstances. I disagree with the analysis on Greenbelt, pages 36, etc. And I was a bit intrigued by the officer who said that the very special circumstances was a shortfall for elderly housing in Epping. Well, Epping is about 6 miles away. This can't possibly alleviate that. So I have not heard anything that means that this application should be consented, because I have not heard the very special circumstances.
Can we go to Councillor Bannott, and then we'll have a sum up at the end, I think.
Thank you. I echo those comments by Councillor Pond. I love the design. I could see myself living there when I'm of that age. But the issue I have is really in relation to the contributions. I know there was a back and forth in relation to the housing, the affordable housing, and various negotiations, but contributions towards the NHS, for example, of 24,000. I mean, the NHS, it costs about 7 million an hour. I don't want to come across saying more, but I do feel that there ought to be a bit more of a pushback with our officers, just in the way they did with the affordable housing with some of the other contributions. So I guess my question to the officers is, well, to what extent has there been any dialogue in relation to any of the other contributions? I appreciate there's been a back and forth in relation to the affordable housing, but to what extent is there scrutiny on, for example, the hopper bus contribution or the NHS contribution or the forest air quality contribution?
In this case, I mean, most of these are done by a kind of standard formula, such as the NHS or education contributions. They're all basically worked out on an agreed level, mostly through county. So it's not that the officers will have asked for, or will have been, it will have been checked that this is the maximum we could get through the system.
May I also add to my colleague Jeremy Godden's comments there that the contribution that was sought, that was sought by the NHS Clinical Commissioning Group, there has been a reconsultation with them and clarity sought on their position before bringing it back to this committee as to whether that sum that they had requested should be increased or varied or whatever it might be. And they've clearly come back and said, they've said to us that, they stand by their original comments and the contribution required, so they haven't actually requested an increase in that number.
Thank you. Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I get some clarification, please? It's been pointed out that this site was in local plan submission version. When in the draft submission, what was the indicative number of units for this allocated to this site?
105 units. It's exactly what's proposed currently.
But was a description given as to what the use category would be? Because was it stated in there that it would be either a C2 or a C3 need?
In the policy, sorry, my question, are you saying whether the policy specifies the type of use, whether it's C3 or C2?
In the draft submission, did we state whether this would be a C2 or a C3 development?
No, we didn't. No, we don't. The policy is just clearly sets out that it's for a specialist housing need. The actual original report provided does cover this matter. There was some to and fro originally in discussions with the applicant about the use, and this was connected to obviously whether the scheme itself should be subject to an affordable housing contribution. I won't go off on a tangent there, but in effect, and as stated in the report, the original report itself, we recognise this scheme as a C3 residential scheme itself.
So, if I can continue, sorry. So in terms of the number of car parking spaces that have been allocated to this site, and with it being deemed as a C3, an assisted living development, surely the level of parking provision on site needs to be greater. By the terminology assisted living, that would indicate that there would be a need for staff provision. I'm assuming catering on site and other specialist services such as physiotherapists, OTs, etc. What allowance was made for those in the car parking provision?
So originally to set out the car parking on the original application submission, the original application itself had indicated the provision for 132 spaces. However, following obviously the review of the scheme, officers had looked at the quantum itself and felt that it was excessive. And we sought to achieve a more balanced approach, given that the for a number of reasons really. It relates to obviously its proximity to existing services and transport connections in the local area. Primarily also the actual nature of the future occupiers. I mean, I'm not perhaps best placed to actually describe who they will be, but as far as I'm aware, the age groups themselves won't necessarily mean that they are unable or immobile in a way, which mean that they rely on vehicle, i.e. their own cars, i.e. car ownership on the site. We are aware that there will be a mix of people, of course, on the site, which will have access, of course, to health facilities and healthcare delivered to them on site, but that doesn't necessarily indicate or mean that everyone that resides on the site themselves. Of course, they will be over a certain age. I think it was above 55, 60, if I recall correctly. It doesn't. And so, in effect, it's those kind of thinking, as well as obviously looking at, trying to, open up the site. I mean, it's a greenbelt location at the present time. zone. We're looking at obviously improving the aesthetics of the site in terms of its general openness. So we felt by reducing the amount of car parking and the ability to integrate further landscaping within that would soften that development a lot more, make it more amenable to its surrounding development as well.
If I can, sorry, Chairman, it's an important point because by definition, assisted living is below that of a residential setting. So the residents that would be inhabiting these units would be more able, therefore, are more likely to be able to drive. At least one partner within the unit would be able to drive. So a 1-for-1, I would see that as an absolute minimum. And there would be a need in an assisting living style development for staffing, whether that be different care packages that would be offered, so care provision throughout the day. If every household was receiving care provision, albeit sometimes a carer or two carers at a time, not all of them would be coming to site via public transport. So I find the level of parking on site to be unsatisfactory. Secondly, I'm a bit confused because in the report it says that the parish council didn't have an objection to this application, but the chairman of the parish council stated this evening that there was an objection from them. So I need some clarity on that.
I believe at the time they thought they had a pecuniary interest because of the cemetery land, and that's why there was no objection. That's what I read. Sorry, could we ask for clarification on that?
Yep.
I think if it's a very short one.
Just on that point made, I just wanted confirmation that all of the points that were raised in the parish council's objection this evening are covered in the report. My final point, very quickly, Chairman, sorry. The number of units that are going to be provided on site would mean that there would need to be a registration to the local GP. If these residents are moving in from out of area, now, there may be an allowance for the number of Chigwell residents that would be moving, that may need this type of facility, but there will be a huge increase in the strain that's provided on the GP practice. So although I appreciate that there's a calculation that calculates the contribution that should go back to the CCG, for example, I find that unsatisfactory, and I would question as to when that contribution or that calculation was made. Was that made as part of the original application, or has that been updated now in line with current, if there's been a change in current standards?
With response to question one, the answer to that is yes, it's all in the report and the addendum. Question two about the finance, I'd have to go back to Mr. Arnett.
So in terms of the contribution towards health facilities in a wider area, so the clinical commissioning group were consulted before bringing this application back to query the position of that contribution. And they've come back and said that, they don't have anything further to add beyond what they did originally as part of this application. And also members should be mindful of that the actual composition of the actual scheme itself, the actual makeup of the scheme hasn't changed. We have the same number of units, the same configurations, etc. The actual use is still providing for the specialist, needs for the elderly. So that hasn't changed also.
Thank you. Can I go to Councillor Heap, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll try and be brief. It's hard to see the special circumstances because although it says that it's identified a local need, whether it's C2 or C3 doesn't really make any odds because this is open to anybody who can get here and have residency and buy one of these places. So I can't see how it can satisfy a local need. And the other thing is the 3 million for 40 units. That's a puzzle because that's £75,000 a unit, which is 37.5 square metres, which is just over the bare minimum, which is a block of flats somewhere. So where is that site been identified?
Councillor Wixley. Sorry, everybody wants to speak tonight.
I'll pass on my question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Councillor Nweki.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the issue I want to raise is what Councillor Heap just mentioned. It's about the affordable home contribution. Considering the number of units proposed to be built here, I felt, thinking about all that's the contribution, I think 3 million is a lot of money, but considering the need for affordable homes, that is not sufficient, to be honest.
Thank you. Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just mindful and cognizant of the objection by the parish council who are very experienced in these matters. On page 35, it talks about having 2 entrances to the site. I remember I went on the original site visit many years ago. There's one principal entrance into this development. There's a route, so the report is wrong. There's a means of escape for emergency vehicles, but there's only one route in to this site, as far as I'm concerned. It's a landlocked site. The report should be accurate. And I'm aware of the of assisted living and the high quality of this developer does, but I've also seen similar schemes and car parking. People who live in these places do have cars. These cars, they're very heavily used and there will be a lot of staff, and I do think there's an insufficient provision for the size of the scheme proposed. It looks architecturally great, it looks too dense. I'm concerned that we are accepting that the affordable should go off-site, because with a clear piece of land, that's the reason that you could put the affordable on-site, because we would have dreadful difficulty spending that money on finding a site to actually put the affordable housing on. Don't need the money, we need the housing. So it just seems a little bit ill-founded, this application. I'm very interested in what the Chickwell councillors have said. They know this area better than I, but I think we need the special circumstances absolutely proven. If they are proven, then it's got to be a great scheme. It's got to have sufficient parking for the staff that are servicing the residents. They are residents, they will have cars, and there's only one way into this site. So I'm wondering if it's just too big or it's just ill-founded.
Thank you. I think we've had a lengthy debate on this one. Mr. Ahmed would like to come back. Sorry,
May,
Mr. Ahmed would like to come back on one of
yeah,
the
may I also come back on, obviously, officers, completely sympathise with obviously concerns in respect to obviously the level of car parking provided, and of course, officers are only seeking to seek compliance with obviously the emerging local plan. And obviously it does this on a site-by-site basis based on, an assessment of obviously the location to existing alternative transport modes, etc. But if members were concerned about the level of parking and would like more parking to be reincorporated, and that can still be achieved by planning condition if they were minded, obviously, to approve the scheme. Just also going back to the point in terms of the very special circumstances, I feel that the actual original report itself has clearly set those out. Of course, it is down to members themselves to consider whether they are indeed very special circumstances for themselves, but we can only report on the basis of our own technical knowledge that the actual the very special circumstances or the material reasons that led to those being very special circumstances are significant in our own minds, and taking that forward in trying to recommend obviously the approval. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Good evening, members. My name is Francisca Moore-Webunike. I'm part of the development team and sort of deal with the affordable housing. With regards to the contribution, and I know a number of people have said, have asked the question where the land would be. I know that my team are sort of making some investigation in Chigwell to ascertain where suitable sites would be to actually build. And we've identified some garages at the moment where these monies could be used. So there are investigative works going on at the moment.
I'm really sorry to interrupt you, but I think this is not really appropriate at this time.
Sorry, Chair, she's a member of the council. She's a council officer who did the appraisal.
I appreciate that.
Oh.
Yeah, please, if you could just sum up, that would be brilliant. It's been a very
I'm sorry.
No problem.
I'm sorry. No, I just wanted really to sort of provide some information or some context to the question asked as to why and how the affordable housing contribution would be used. So we are looking to identify land. We have identified some, and the work continues. So these contributions will come in very handy, to support the council's house building program.
Thank you for summing that up. I appreciate it. I believe Councillor Sumner wants to come back. It has to be really. It has to be really quick.
Mr. Chairman, it's a really important point, because we're asked as members to make a decision based on this application that is set in front of us with the information. I'm sorry, in the absence of Chigwell Parish Council's objection, which is not in this report, I find it difficult how we could make a decision if we haven't got all the information in front of us, because this is saying that Chigwell Parish Council supports the application, and we know that's not the case now.
Members, I think that Mr. Ahmed coming back.
May I also point out, unfortunately, it's the way the agenda was published this evening, which might have been a bit misleading for members, that the addendum to the original report in item 9 actually identifies the parish's objection. It clearly identifies that. That was the supplementary item which identifies the parish's objection, which were considered. I just thought I'd make that point as a factual point.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Members, I think the debate is now closed. We have an officer's recommendation to grant permission subject to all of the agreements and all the section 106s we've discussed. All those members who vote for this application, please show.
Zero.
All those against? Abstentions? Abstentions?
As 2.
Thank you. That application has been refused.
No.
Sorry, Chair, that's
we
in
need a motion
stasis.
for
Yeah.
refusal, of course. Would anybody like to put forward a motion for refusal and the reasons for that refusal? Councillor Pond, thank you.
That's it. I'm willing to suggest some reasons of refusal. First of all, represents inappropriate development in the green belt, and very special circumstances to permit it have not been adduced. Secondly, that the contribution proposed for affordable housing is insufficient compared with the GDV of nearly £80 million. And then local members, I hope, would add to that, because that's just as I see it, as a bit of a foreigner.
Sorry, Councillor, what was the second one? I missed part of it.
Insufficient contribution for affordable housing as a proportion of the estimated gross development value of nearly £80 million.
I think from the debate we should add in the number of car parking spaces. Any other additions to this motion?
If we could add perhaps the parking spaces as well.
That's what I just said.
We said that, yeah.
No, that's what I
okay.
just
And
said.
also the additional contributions that there could be
They're
that's
both
done as well?
Yep.
Is it?
Councillor Patel.
Chairman, I think it's the additional stress that these units are going to cause to local health services. I think that needs to be properly investigated. Not sure how you can word that as part of our grounds for refusal.
I'm not sure that's a valid planning reason to refuse, but we can certainly put it in and explore it.
May I just add the question of the SAC, because the strategy to which is designed to mitigate the air pollution issue has not yet been approved by the inspector, and that is generally, I think, what officers would add anyway.
Well, we can put that in.
I will put it in, yeah.
No, I don't, Chairman, think this is especially problematic case because it's quite a long way from the SAC.
Okay, members, the evening draws on. We have a motion. We have a proposal. We need a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Barlow. We have a motion.
That's fine. I was going to just add something into that about overdevelopment and strain on the infrastructure. Can we not say it as that way?
No.
I think that might be problematic, but we'll...
Massively.
Yeah, I think it might be massively problematic, but we'll put it there. Members, you have a motion that has been proposed and seconded. Thank you. All those in favour of the motion to refuse, please signify.
$17.
All those against? Abstentions?
Extensions 1.
Sorry? Thank you. Thank you, members. That was a bit of a slog. We'll carry on to the next item.
Chair, do you want to just confirm that has, for the webcast, that motion is carried in the...
Yeah, that motion has been carried. Thank you. Moving on, item 10, EPF 0633/20. Just a second. Yes, Councillor Allgood.
Sorry, if I could just apologise for my coughing. I lost my voice during the street party, so it's not COVID, it's just I've aggravated my throat.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. EPF 0633/20, 233/235, Fence Piece Road, Chigwell. We have the officers' report, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I just seem to be having some issue with my screen share for some bizarre reason. All right, just a minute.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, just a minute. It's, there we go. Right, this is an application at 233 Fence Piece Road. This is an application, or 233 to 235 Fence Piece Road in Chigwell. It's for demolition of 2 semi-detached dwellings and a replacement with 6 apartments with a basement car park. This is a SAC case that was held in abeyance and is now progressing. As you can see, the site is a roughly L-shaped site with one of the donor units having a larger garden than the other. Aerial photograph shows the general area of the site. You can see it's a well-developed, well-built-up site. This is the current application, the pair of semi-detached houses that have clearly been extended over the time in a somewhat non-organic manner. Existing floor plans of the site. And this is the proposed street scene of the site. You can see the original outline of the properties are dashed on there, but the more solid drawings are what would be proposed here to give the impression of a pair of semi-detached houses, one on slightly higher ground than the other, although obviously this is one building with 6 flats within it. This is the side elevation, again showing the outline of the original building, so some increase in height, but it's not as deep. And this is the ground floor layout showing the garden areas and the access to the basement with a car lift into the basement. And then the rooms on the first floor and a room in the roof on the left-hand or northern pair. So these are the northern elevations. Sorry, I think I've got that wrong actually. Yes, that's the rear elevation, not the side elevation. Sorry, my mistake. These are the side elevations. You can see the building, the original outline of the building there. And this is clearly a deeper building than was previously there. This shows the layout of the basement, which is for parking of vehicles and will be served by a lift. Photographs of the existing site and of the street scene in this location. Let's go back to that one. With this site, we have received a number of objections. Chigwell Parish Council objected because of the proposal would result in an overdevelopment of the existing site, establishing an undesirable precedent which is out of character for the locality, and that the proposed vehicle parking facilities are wholly behind the policy standard, and the suggestion to install a car lift seems highly impractical. We have also seen a number of other objections, as you can see in the officer's report, including the Chigwell Residents Association, members of people living in Fencepriest Drive, Myrtlewell Drive and Shrublands Close, which are summarised as congestion, impact on infrastructure in terms of water supplies, parking issues, insufficient parking, flooding, strain on services, sets a precedent, loss of privacy, overshadow, highway safety, noise from the car lift, bulky and overdevelopment, out of character and forward of the building line. In terms of the general principle of the development, this is an urban site and redevelopment of urban sites are encouraged to avoid the use of greenbelt land. It is a kilometre and a half to the services within Barkingside and a kilometre to the Grange Hill underground station. The officer has laid out her report on page 53 and 54 as to the impact and the character and appearance of this scheme. It is considered that the scheme is appropriate within the street scene. This is certainly a street scene of a number of different styles and types of housing, from large detached houses to semi-detached and terraces within the area. So there's no overall coherent appearance from a built form in the street scene, and it's considered that this is a well-designed property that would adequately sit on the plot without being cramped or excessive within its size. It has adequate space both at the front and rear. Although forward of the parking line, this would not cause, the building line to the northern property, this would not cause any significant adverse impact in terms of loss of light. In terms of overlooking, there would be no adverse overlooking on neighbours to either the north or the south of the property. With regards to the highways and parking, there's 7 parking places supplied, which is compliant with policy T1 in the submission vocal version of the local plan, which is now a very material consideration considering how close the local plan is to adoption. It is also considered this is a fairly sustainable location within a kilometre of an underground station, and bike storage is proposed. The neighbours' concerns are noted, but the number of spaces are policy compliant, and we have no objection from the Highways Authority at Essex. In terms of the basement, we have had a basement impact assessment, which concludes that the basement is easily doable without harm to drainage, etc. And it is, in terms of the Epping Forest SAC, suitable subject to the interim strategy and a Section 106 agreement, should members be minded to approve this. The parking lift issue is noted, but there's no policy reason to refuse that. So the officer's overall recommendation that it is acceptable within this area. It's a well-conceived design, drawing on the surrounding detailing, with limited harm to surrounding neighbours, and is a sustainable part of the district, and therefore the recommendation, subject to conditions and the Section 106 agreement, is to grant permission.
Thank you for that presentation. We have 2 speakers, the first being the objector, Anne Russell. Thank you. You have 3 minutes, Anne, your microphone. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Anne Russell and I live with my husband Victor at 231 Fencepiece Road, where we have lived since 1966. Our house is adjacent to the proposed development. These flats are planned to be built just 1 metre from the boundary, which will be 1 metre from our property and back garden. There will be hardly any clearance at the side, which for such a large building seems ludicrous. This site is much too small for a building of this size and would be regarded as an overdevelopment. We will be overshadowed, overlooked, suffer a loss of privacy, and in our back gardens will lose the peace and quiet that we have enjoyed and have been accustomed to, as will our close neighbours of 1 and 1A Myrtwell Drive. We will be boxed in and have a feeling of enclosure. The proposed parking spaces are most inadequate for this development. 6 spaces underground and 1 above is a joke, and it falls well below Essex parking standards. There is no room for any overspill parking on the 2 side roads, as Myrtwell Drive and Shrublands Close are full to bursting with residents' cars. This potentially could cause unrest in the wider community and could result in aggressive behaviour if the residents of these flats attempted to park in these roads. Additionally, Fencepiece Road, A123, is a very busy and narrow road. Hence, you are unable to park curbside or on the grass verges. A car lift is totally acceptable to us, being just 1 metre away from our property. We will experience noise and disturbance, and it should not be permitted. Due to the incline of the hill, this site is on higher ground than many nearby houses. Therefore, these properties, ours included, may be at risk of flooding due to the sheer bulk of this building and the basement car park needing much excavation for its construction. Manor Road, leading to Woodford Bridge, is currently being peppered with blocks of luxury flats after good quality family homes have been demolished. There will be luxury flats being built everywhere, running through Chigwell quicker than a dose of salts, altering the character and charm of Chigwell forever. There have been 22 objections to this planning application. There have been 2 parish council meetings. The results of both these meetings was that all the parish councillors strongly objected to the proposed plans. I believe we have good grounds for objecting. We all have good grounds for objecting due to the detrimental effect it will have on us and the wider community. These developers are not providing a public service. This is not a development for social housing. This is purely for financial gain. This area is already fully developed. I really need you
to wind up because it's the 3
minutes. Yes, I am.
Over.
Is desirable and is not in need of regeneration. I believe the proposed development would be detrimental and will spoil the street scene. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Our second speaker is on behalf of the Parish Council, I believe, Selina Jeffcoat. Thank you.
Thank you. It's like Groundhog Day, isn't it? Another large block of flats, not in the local plan, crammed to the edge of a small plot, not enough parking, little amenity space, and a car lift. Essex Highways and Planners chose to apply T1 when accepting reduced parking here. I do wish Essex Highways would actually read our local plan. I have, and they're wrong. The local plan acknowledges not everywhere has the transport links of Loughton or Epping. The local plan requires Epping Forest to take a more focused approach to car parking and develop specific residential parking standards for individual areas, not case by case, but specific area standards. The local plan emphasises that until those standards are adopted, planning applications will use Essex parking standards as the starting point. T1 is a long-term policy and states that only where practical and within 400 metres of a railway station will the council seek to reduce parking. As we've already heard from planning officers this evening, Grange Hill Station is almost 1.5 kilometres away. T1 could not and should not apply, even if specific local parking standards had been adopted by Epping Forest, which they have not. There are no cycle routes, no pedestrian routes, no car sharing, no bike hire, no local amenities, and with only 2 bus routes, precious few accessible alternatives to car usage. The parking here is already a problem, as we've heard. To have only 7 parking spaces when the local plan says there should be at least 10 is going to cause problems. To have 6 of these only accessible via car lift will result in noise and disturbance to neighbours when the lift is used, and an increase in parking on the street when it is not. According to the submission, this car lift generates over 50 decibels when used. That's about the same as a washing machine. Various complex calculations commissioned by the applicant claim it would not disturb residents even at night. To paraphrase Mandy Rice-Davis, well, they would say that, wouldn't they? Developments with car lifts have been refused before by our planners. They believe noise and disturbance would make them contrary to policy DB9 of the local plan. We're not in central London. If a car lift is the only way to shoehorn in parking, the site is clearly overdeveloped. Then there's flooding. As a local councillor, I saw for myself the heartbreak and damage caused by flooding here in July last year. One nearby house is still uninhabitable. I also remember 2006, where it had equally devastating results. To have a basement here seems not only foolish, but given the speed at which flooding has occurred previously, potentially deadly. This application is wholly unwelcome. We have a local plan for a reason, and both planners and our district councillors should be ensuring compliance. This site is not in the local plan. This proposal does not meet local plan parking policy. This proposal won't assist Epping Forest in meeting its carbon net zero targets. It is in an area that experience, rather than a desktop survey, shows is at significant risk of local flooding. For these valid planning reasons, we ask you to refuse it.
Thank you. We have the ward councillors on this. Councillor Barlow. Sorry, could you? Thank you.
Thank you. No, I quite agree. I do believe that this is overdevelopment. I've looked at the size of the property and the land, and I totally agree with everything that's been said today. I do believe that there's not enough parking spaces, and as Councillor Jeffcoat has rightly said, it's not in our local plan. And again, I echo what she's been saying all along, is that we are just getting more and more flats being built in Chigwell, and what was our lovely village, even though Councillor Pond doesn't think it's a village, is now just becoming just a place with just lots and lots of flats, and we are losing, you know, its aesthetic appeal of why, you know, what Chigwell means. So thank you.
Thank you. Can I just say not every application will be in the local plan. The local plan is an overview. Not every single application will be in it.
Yeah,
Councillor
understand that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, of course, in the local plan, these are called windfall sites. But in my experience, the windfall is very often a rotten apple. So make of that what you will. To my mind, the most cogent factor on this was adduced by the objector when she said the peace and quiet of our enjoyment of our garden for the inhabitants of 229, 231 and the other side will be impaired. And I think that is absolutely right. I think this is an antisocial application. I think the car lift, we dealt with a car lift not so long ago, Mr. Chairman, also in Chigwell at the corner of Cortland Drive and High Road. Members said exactly the same thing, that the noise and the vibration would be harmful, and I suspect the same would be here. And of course, it's inherently unsustainable to demolish a pair of perfectly good semi-detached houses and replace them because of the carbon embodied in the existing dwellings. So that is an unsustainable act. The only thing I would slightly take issue with, which has been said, is that bus route 167 passes the door. That runs every 20 minutes between 5:30 in the morning and 5:30 midnight. And I think there is an element of sustainability in that. But agree, it's not within, it's within more like 3/4 of a mile of Chigwell Station, which is not particularly walkable. But for those reasons, I think the cogent point made by the objector about the peace and quiet and enjoyment of their garden is the salient point.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. This site is on a main road, is the first thing I'd say in terms of the potential for the noise and disturbance from the lift. It is on a main road, which is not expected to be as quiet as perhaps a rural back lane development. From the point of view of the development on the site, from the plans, this is it's not a cramped or over-oppressive form of development on the site. It is to within the policies within the local plan of metre gaps to the north and south, but there is a considerable area left on the site that is not development. And with the flats there, I'm not convinced how that would cause noise and disturbance to local residents from people using the flats and living in the flats any more than any other form of residential occupation of the site.
Councillor Bernard, sorry.
I'm going to try not to object to everything this evening, but 10 out of 10 for design, 10 out of 10 for ambition, 0 out of 10 in terms of choosing the right area. Even if I give the planning officer the benefit of the doubt on overdevelopment, I do feel, kind of having driven on Fencepiece Road twice a day, that it is completely out of, I feel is completely out of character for that particular road. And I think there is a real concern in terms of setting the precedent. I think if this goes through, I think there will be half a dozen houses tomorrow morning, owners licking their lips and thinking, actually, we can make a quick buck here. And I think that's a real concern, going back to what was said by the objectors, in the sense that, Chigwell won't be Chigwell if more and more houses, perfectly good houses, start becoming blocks of flats. The only I had to bite my lip here because I think the planning officer said towards the end of his, and I hope I haven't misheard it, but I did write a note, was it would only cause limited harm to surrounding neighbours. And I hope I haven't misquoted you on this, and if I have, I apologise. But I would have thought any development should cause no harm to neighbours, not limited harm. I think limited harm is probably not the gold standard that we are aiming towards.
No, you're quite right, but every development will cause some form of harm, and it is the job of the officers to assess whether that harm would be so sufficient as to justify a refusal, or whether it is acceptable within the terms of the development. And that will differ from whether you're in a rural location to whether you're in an urban location, whether you're on, say, a shop front above shops on the high street as opposed to within a cul-de-sac. So there will all development will cause some form of harm to some people in terms of noise and disturbance, because if you change, for example, an open plot to a house, there will be people coming and going. So clearly there will be some harm, and it is the officer's job to assess whether that harm is sufficient to justify a refusal. Now, in this case, the officer has carried out that assessment and has come to the conclusion that it doesn't justify a refusal.
Councillor Pond, I believe you wanted to come back.
Well, I don't know, Chairman. I just thought that was a bit of a novel dictum from the planning officer here, that we have to tolerate more deleterious effects in a main road simply because there is traffic going up and down it than we would in a side road. I just don't buy that.
What I would say, Councillor, is that the assessment is that you are going to have more noise from a main road than you would in the side seat. So that's part of the assessment, is when we look at, say, you may be able to argue that in a side street, which is a lot more quieter than on a main road, a car lift may be more noisy than it would be on the main road. But that's part of the assessment. There clearly is more noise on the main road than there would be on a side road from traffic and the other use.
Thank you. Councillor Wixley.
Well, surely if there's more noise on a main road, that's all the more reason for not increasing it.
No, that's not the case, Councillor. The argument would be that there is noise on the main road, so the background noise, the tolerance to background noise is more than it would be on a side road. That would be how we would look at it.
Thank you. Councillor Heap.
I think that's utter nonsense, because the car lift might be used at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning when there's no traffic around, so it will have an impact. So to say that it won't or it doesn't matter is ridiculous.
Thank you.
Well, sorry, Councillor, we're not saying it won't have an impact. We're saying we've assessed the impact on this location is such that it wouldn't justify a refusal. And that is the professional opinion of the officers.
Yeah. Members, can we go to a vote on this? It is before us with a recommendation to grant permission. Can we ask all those in favour to please vote?
Zero.
Against?
$17.
Abstentions? Members?
One abstention.
Thank you. Members, we need a motion for refusal. Councillor Bannott.
Sorry. I'd say the first would be out of character. The second would be an undesirable president, or words to that effect, that would meet the policy. I would also be minded to say overdevelopment as well, but I'd probably defer to the ward councillor if she would agree with that.
I did say that, but I think the officer has said that it is actually, he said, well, within the policy. So to them, it wasn't overdevelopment. I would add, though, the parking, the lack of parking to that as well.
I mean, sorry, can I just come back? If members have concerns about the size and bulk and the mass of the building, and if you disagree with me, that's absolutely fine, but it would be along the lines of this would be a cramped form of development because of the height, bulk and mass of the building. I mean, my advice is that isn't the case, but if members want to go with it, that's how it would be worded.
Yep. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Councillor Bond.
Yeah, may I just add, Chairman, to that? I quite agree with that, but I think we would have to add the harm it would cause to the amenity of the neighbours in the quiet enjoyment of their private amenity space.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Yep.
I got that, but what is the harm? Oh, sorry, what causes the harm?
Yes, by virtue of overlooking noise pollution and possible vibration from the car lift.
I presume, Councillor Ballard, it is your proposal, this motion. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Barlow. And we have a motion for refusal, both proposed and seconded. All those in favour?
$17.
Against? And abstentions?
One abstention.
Members, that has been refused. Thank you. Hmm? Do you want to break now? Members, while we're bringing Councillor Sunga back in, can we go for a 5-minute comfort break? Thank you. Members, can we now continue, please? The next step is item 10, is Land and Garages, Chequers Road, Site B, Loughton, Essex. If we could have the officer's report.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This is a council-owned site. It's a garage site, of which a number have been before all three committees over the last few years. And this is an application to remove the garages and erect housing within the site. The application seeks consent for the construction of one building which will have 8 flats with associated parking and landscaping. There was a previous application granted for this site in 2015 with 5 two-bed flats on the property, and this will now, if this is granted permission, will be 8 flats. This is, as you can see, it's a roughly square site backing onto the underground railway, which is overground in that particular place, with dwellings both sides and to the north of a fairly uniform type one expects on the Debden estate. The aerial photograph shows the site here, which I believe has been partially cleared, and photographs of the site showing the actual gap between the housing in this particular area. So the proposal is for a flat-roofed 3-storey building with undercroft parking. Similar to a lot of the flats that have been put up around the district, it's fair to say that there's not a uniform style that has been adopted by the council, but there is a similarity of modern design with many of them. So the block plan shows the properties on the site, the garden area to the rear, and how the property sits within the actual block itself. Ground floor plan showing undercroft parking for 4 of the parking spaces, plus the bicycle as well, and bin stores. Then the first floor living accommodation and second floor living accommodation. At back you have balconies which would be protected with privacy screens to the sides to avoid overlooking of the neighbouring properties. Probably the best one to stay on. We have received a number of objections to the scheme. Loughton Town Council have objected as laid out on page 61, basically along the lines of the height, bulk, material and design out of keeping, potential for antisocial behaviour at the undercrofts, privacy of neighbours, parking spaces for the flats inadequate, and noticed that while it had previously been granted, this would now affect the SAC. We've also received objections from the residents in Checkers Road and Deepdean Road and the Residents Association as well. Overlooking from balconies, out of character, blocking light to kitchens and first floor of number 81, increasing parking issues, encouraging antisocial behaviour. The 3 stories of out of keeping in the 2016 application was much better. I think I'm not sure if I've got a late objection for this particular site. I've got a couple. No, it wasn't actually. Oh, no, yes. Yeah, we have got a late objection for very similar reasons to the others from a resident in Checkers Road. Okay, so the main issues here are the principle of the development, design amenity, highways, parking and impact on the SAC. The principle of the development has already been agreed with the proposal for 5 dwellings originally. It is accepted that this increases the number of dwellings from 5 to 8, but it is on the built-up area of Loughton, on the previously developed site, within easy walking distance of both the underground station at Debden and the shops and services of Debden Broadway and Langston Road. It is considered that the increase of number of these much-needed dwellings is a better use of the site in a very sustainable location. And as a council application, these will be socially rented out, which benefits the wider community. The design is a flat roof, 2.5-storey building. It is considered that it isn't typical, and the officer is quite clear as he lays out in her report on page 62. They're not typical of the pitched roof of the neighbouring properties. But this is a contemporary design with separation, as you can see from the plans, to the neighbours, both the left and right. They're not built right up to the boundary. And it is considered to relate positively and to make a positive contribution in line with policies. Materials have been thought out to add to the contemporary appearance, and basically the scheme has decided not to be a pastiche of what's there at the moment, but have what is clearly a very different scheme that makes a statement about the regeneration of the whole area. So from the officer's perspective, it is considered to be an acceptable addition and doesn't cause any harm to the street scene. In terms of the impact on the neighbours, it is considered that there will be not any unacceptable loss of light to neighbours to the east and west. The balconies will have privacy screens to avoid overlooking of the rear garden areas, and any overlooking of the rear garden areas that would occur would be the type you would expect from any dwelling. They're not looking directly into people's rear elevations, which would be unacceptable, but there are long views over the garden area, which you would expect in such an area, and indeed already exist on either side in any event. In terms of the impact on light, it is noted that there will have an impact, but it's the same height as the maisonettes to the north side of Chequers Road, which is considered limited. And to the east and west, given the depth of the rear elevation behind number 75 and 81 Chequers Road, there will be some loss of early morning and late afternoon light, but it is set in 4 metres from the boundaries, as it lays out there, from number 75 and 1.5 from number 81. And it is accepted again that there is a first floor window at number 81 which will lose some light, but is a secondary window. It is considered that this would not be enough to justify a refusal. In terms of highways and parking, it provides 6 parking spaces for the 8 flats, which is, and I hesitate to say this after the last 2 applications, acceptable in accordance with the local plan policy T1, which does state that reduced car parking, including car-free development in sustainable locations, will be supported. And in this instance, it is 750 metres from the underground station and then the suction services beyond it. And there is ample covered cycle parking provided. In terms of the appropriate assessment, this has been carried out, and the council is subject to the completion of a Section 106 planning agreement and the relevant conditions. It would not have an adverse impact on the Epping Forest SAC. Considering all of this, the officer's recommendation is to approve, subject to a legal agreement.
We have 2 ward councillors. Do they wish to speak on this application? Councillor Nweke.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, looking at this application, I tend to agree with all the objections that was raised, and this leaves me with the difficult balancing act of accepting affordable housing, which is very much needed, and the issues that this will cause in the street. Parking is a big issue in this road, which is always an issue that comes up from residents complaining about the amount of parking that is not available for on the street. And as well, I have issue with the view that some loss of light will be acceptable. So I'm just wondering, what does that mean? What amount of light will be acceptable for the resident that lives in the street? And the other aspect is the parking provision, which is, to me, is not enough. And the bike provision as well, the secure parking for the bikes, which is just 8 parking space for bikes for 8 flats, which I think, to my mind, is not enough. So can you please, I just want to find out, why has this been increased from 5 to 8 dwellings?
Thank you. Because it's a better use of urban land to get more units onto the site would be the simplest answer to that. In terms of light assessments, we look at whether there will be loss of daylight and sunlight, and then if there is loss of daylight and sunlight, we then assess it to see whether it, again, somewhat similar to the noise on the last issue, whether it would be acceptable or whether it would justify a refusal. In this instance, it's considered that it doesn't justify a refusal. With the parking, well, the officers have looked at it because of its proximity to the underground station and its sustainable location, and it is acceptable, and not everyone will have a car in this day and age. And the parking, the bike spaces are what's considered acceptable by the architects, and we've got no particular, because again, not everyone's going to own a bike, so it's a good provision for this type of scheme.
Do you want to come back? Yeah.
Can I come back? Because, well, I understand we're trying to push people to reduce car ownership to go on more sustainable way of traveling. If we're doing that, then we should be providing more amenities to encourage that to happen. I know for myself, in my house, I have 4 bikes. So saying 8 spaces for 8 flats is enough. I don't think that is reasonable. And the other aspect is we're trying to balance the need for affordable homes and the impact it will have on the street and those that are living at the street at the moment. So for that reason, I think it would be wise to leave the proposal as it was before, which is 5 dwellings, and probably increase the amount of bike parking space for the site.
Thank you. Councillor Allgood.
Thank you. Hopefully my voice will last. Can I just ask why the previous one was actually, why they changed it when it was already accepted?
Well, the scheme wasn't implemented, so that one that's fallen by the wayside, and they've come back with a revised application that has another 3 units on it because of the council's housing policy, I would assume.
Okay, because having been to the site, it is begging to be developed. I'm very surprised that they decided to change one that had already been accepted. This is so out of character with the rest of the street. I thought there was something to do with flooding. It gets a flood area, which is why they had to put the garages at the bottom, which doesn't seem to be mentioned. It was a sacrificial floor, and that's one of the reasons why they put garages on the bottom, because it's actually below the rest of the houses in the street. Everyone's looking at
You're right, the officer doesn't mention any flooding issues there. But all I can say to that is from the street scene, it's on the same level as the properties on the south of the road. So I can't see that would be a reason. They wouldn't have left it for flooding as far as I can see for that reason, because of where it is in connection with the other houses.
Councillor Pond.
Very confused, Chairman, because on page 60, the officer reports EPF 260915 was approved and implemented, and it has been implemented in that the garage blocks have been demolished. So, to my mind, EPF 260915 is still a valid planning consent and could be implemented tomorrow. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I'm wrong. You're right. Yes. So I hadn't read that, but yes, if they commenced the work and implemented it, which if they've knocked down the what was there, then yes, they have implemented it. That's my mistake. So they could develop the 2015 one now.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, in that case, I suggest they should, because this is poor design, bulky and overbearing. It's totally incongruent with other dwellings in the vicinity, and I certainly don't consider it contributes positively to the atmosphere of Chequers Road. It is half a mile from the station. I used to walk half a mile to the station without undue problems. So I wonder whether the parking issues were better catered for in the 2016 consent, and I'm wondering if Mr. Godden could put the diagrams for that up on the screen.
I'll need a couple of minutes.
I think we would need time to be able to do that.
In that case, Mr. Chairman, it's the EPF. Where are we?
260915.
2609 and 15 was consented in 16.
Does anybody else want to speak while we're bringing this up? Councillor Mead.
I just wanted to ask about the balconies. What sort of size are they? And they kind of the sort of balconies, is it just to open a door out onto them, or can you walk out onto them?
I believe it's shown on the plans when we get a set. They are actual balconies, yeah.
And the screening, what kind of screening? Can we have a picture of what the screening might look like?
I'm afraid not. It's no, is a simple answer.
Point of order, Chairman. On bottom of page 61, it notes that approval had been granted under 2609/14, not 15. But I would have thought it was 15, but might be better to check.
15. It We're looking it up as we speak.
So that's a kind of 3D drawing of the previously approved.
Well, Chairman, I'd be inclined to move a motion seeking to refuse this one and with the way forward implement the consented scheme.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine, but a refusal would make this go to DDMC. As it's council-owned property, it would have to go to DDMC if it's refused. Yeah,
DDMC with a recommendation to refuse.
Absolutely. It would go to DDMC with a recommendation to refuse, yeah. Can we have the proposal, the motion for... Sorry, Councillor Owen.
Quick question. Why does the applicant come as Mr. John Hayes, not as the council?
It would be part of the, it would be the development agency that the council has gone with.
Could we have a proposal for a motion for refusal?
Chairman, I think before you go straight to refusal, you need to take a vote, or anybody could, propose to send it to DDMC.
We have a motion to grant permission recommended by the officers. All those in favour of that motion to grant permission?
0.
All those against the...
(15)
Abstentions?
4.
Even the lights are giving up on us now. A motion?
Motion to refuse on the basis of poor design, bulky and overbearing and incongruent with other dwellings in the vicinity. I think that'll do.
Thank you. So we will now vote on that proposal for refusal. All those in favour?
Sorry, 15.
All those against?
0.
Abstentions?
4.
Members, that will go to DDMC with a recommendation for refusal.
Way forward,
we do not do way forward anymore.
implement the consented scheme.
If they want to, they can.
Okay.
Sorry, was that implement the 15?
I'd imagine so, but we're not doing. Thank you, members. Moving on, as does the time, it is item 12, To the Uplands, Loughton.
Okay, so Mr. Rahman is presenting this. So
It is being presented on Zoom.
Thank you, Chair. So item 12 relates to a pair of semi-detached dwellings within the donor house to the uplands. So this is the location plan of to the uplands, and it sits on a bend. This is the proposed site plan slash ground floor plan. So over here is the other pair of semis. They each have 2 car parking spaces each. Over here, and you have the rear garden over here. And over here is the retained garden space for the house to the uplands. So over here is the proposed first floor plan. So it's a 2-bed building. And above is the proposed roof plan. And a section view over here. These are the proposed elevations. And this is the existing proposed street scene plan. This is the CGI of the proposed development over here. This is an aerial view. So this is the application site over here. This is the garage to be demolished. This is from a different angle. And a closer view. This application has gathered a lot of local interest. Set out on page 73. There's been some 34 objections. The merits of the scheme are set out within the same report, and I take this as read. And officers are recommending approval subject to section 106.
Excuse me. We're having great difficulty hearing you at the back of the chamber. If you could speak up a little, it maybe help. Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Is this better?
I think a bit more volume would help.
Is this better now?
That's better. That's better. Thank you.
So officers are recommending this application for approval, subject to a section 106 agreement. And as mentioned previously, the merits of the scheme are set out in the report, along with the concerns raised by local residents. And that's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 2 speakers on this application. 3, sorry. Yep, there are 3. First of all, Victoria Hill, the objector. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Victoria Hill. I reside at 4 The Uplands and have lived in Loughton and the surrounding areas for over 30 years. I'm speaking on behalf of myself, but also representing the other 16 objectors. I'm passionate about where I live, as are my neighbours. We love living in the heart of Epping Forest and being so close to the wonderful opportunities we can all enjoy. I'm also passionate about protecting this area for my family, neighbours and future generations. Parking is an issue in the Uplands for the residents due to local businesses and schools, meaning an already limited on-street parking spaces. The proposed development will further exacerbate the issue by removing more on-street parking. The recent computer-generated image submitted by the applicant fails to show the terraced effect that this development will create to the street scene. Our area is characterised by homes with significant green space, but if this proposal goes ahead, then a flank wall will dominate the host dwelling. The amenity space issue raised by Loughton Town Council has not been considered. Uplands Court in particular will suffer a loss of any sunlight and daylight into their downstairs living room area due to the close proximity of the proposed development being permitted to a 1 metre distance. Of course, this won't bother the applicant because no doubt they will have sold up and moved out. The overall lack of amenity space is a real issue, which just seems to have been brushed over. We're all very shocked at the casual approach that has been proposed by the planning officer. The planning officer has proposed that the future of our area can be secured through financial payments by the applicant, but we simply do not agree. This is not a large-scale development and any financial payments will undoubtedly be small. What can the council do with such a small payment to offset the environmental impact this application represents? As Loughton Town Council noted, the impact on our neighbourhood from the willful destruction of a beautiful mature garden has been significant. We should not be doubling down on this by concreting over the green spaces that are left. In summer 2020 and 2021, Loughton Cricket Club and Fielding Court flooded. With the removal of a large section of the garden that naturally absorbs rainfall, there is a concern that this will further add runoff water within the area and result in more flooding. Loughton Town Council strongly objected to the proposal in January 2021 and January 2022. The application has not been amended to reflect any of their comments.
Do you just want to...
It was only one more line.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
The objectors and I believe this application should be refused.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Councillor Carol Davis for Loughton Town Council.
Thank you, Chairman. Loughton Town Council strongly object to this application. This stretch of the uplands was one of the most lovely corners of Loughton, purely for its street scene and the green expanse of shade the mature garden offered. This proposal is an overdevelopment of the site and the worst example of garden grabbing. It is quite out of keeping with the street scene of mainly detached houses on large plots. The development of a large part of the garden would negatively affect the amenity of the subsequent owners of the host property, with an outlook onto a large two-storey expanse of blank wall. It would also greatly reduce the size of the amenity space of the host property. This will leave a minimal space that is completely out of proportion to the size of the house. As with the removal of the mature garden, this proposal will have a pronounced detrimental effect on the amenity of all residents in neighbouring properties, but particularly at For the Uplands and those in Uplands Court. As well, this proposal will greatly exacerbate the existing parking problems experienced by residents in this part of the uplands. The proposal will result in a significant loss of existing on-street parking. Also, as the uplands has parking on both sides of the road, a nursery on the corner with Church Hill, flats opposite and a sharp 90-degree turn, through traffic will be very negatively impacted by this proposal. The first thing that the new owner did was to remove all the mature trees and planting that existed at this property. This has affected the visual amenity of neighbouring properties. It has also had an extremely detrimental impact on the street scene, and by removing all shade must have raised the air temperature. Furthermore, it has resulted in multiple habitats for insects, birds and wildlife being destroyed. Set so close to the forest, this green corner used to shelter wildlife, now it is, in comparison, it is quite barren. We are appalled by the destruction of the whole garden at this property in order to facilitate this wholly unacceptable and out of keeping overdevelopment and garden grabbing proposal. This is a garden. It should remain a garden.
Thank you. Our third speaker is the applicant, Mr. Gary Stone. Thank you.
No, sorry, sir. You need to turn the microphone.
Can you turn your microphone? Thank you. Now that could go on.
Good evening, Chairman and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity of me addressing you this evening. From the start of this application, we have given careful consideration to the type of scheme to be submitted on the grounds that it should be in character with the street scene, whilst also being proportional to the space around it and being affordable housing. It was important for us and our architect to consult with the planning officers at a very early stage with the pre-planning application. We incorporated all the recommendations into the full application, and we are pleased to see that your planning officers have recommended this for approval. The application is for a pair of smallest two-storey semi-detached, two-bedroom and three-person dwellings. Each dwelling meets the national space standards. There are no proposed windows on the side elevations, and the first floor rear windows are obscured glass to stairwells and above 1.7 metres high for bathrooms and ensuite roof windows. Thus, there is no overlooking of loss of amenity to the side or other dwellings and gardens to the sides and rear. Externally, the rear amenity space meets or exceeds the 50 square metres with at least a 1 metre sideway to both properties. There are 2 car parking spaces per dwelling to comply with the Essex highways, plus electric charging point. Soft landscaping surrounds the parking to the frontage in order to soften the impact on the street scene and as set out in the pre-app response. The external design follows the guidelines of the Essex Design Guide together with LPA reference of the nearby York Hill Conservation with vernacular design and coloured rendering elevations to complement the host dwelling. We noted the concerns raised by Loughton Parish Council in regards to removal of trees from the garden and loss of habitat. On moving into the property in 2019, we had concerns about the trees. We sought advice from 2 local long-established tree surgeons, one of which is a contractor for the council. Both agree that the trees were overgrown and unsustainable for the size of garden as a result of poor, non-existent maintenance over a number of years. Many of the trees were in decline and stricken with ivy. 2 were dead and at least 3 were undermining the fabric of the house because of their close proximity. We have replanted a number of trees and over 100 shrubs, and pleased to say that wildlife has returned. In recent times, Loughton has seen a number of house developments from replacement dwellings of larger proportions to completely new builds, but very few that can be deemed as affordable homes for the local community near the high road. We believe this scheme provides this. In conclusion, it's considered that the proposed scheme represents an appropriate build of 2 homes that are well proportioned to the surroundings. Chairman and Committee, we would appreciate your consideration in approving this application so that we can move forward for building affordable homes for our children. We are keen to work with the committee on providing the most appropriate scheme for us in Loughton and welcome any comments you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. 2 ward councillors, Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. I may be repeating some of the remarks made, so please bear with me over that. After the entry to the uplands, there is a sharp, as was mentioned, a sharp left turn. This house is the first after that on a road of attractive and unique detached houses. As you can see from the plans, all the gardens are of the same length and mostly the same width. And the houses that have not, and the houses are a very attractive mixture of styles in the road, and they have not been modified or overdeveloped, and they retain their original features, unlike many other roads in the district, which have been spoiled by overdevelopment. The house sits on a very sharp corner, as has been mentioned, where there have been parking problems in the past, but now it has double yellow lines on both sides of the road, opposite the house and around the front of the property. This area, as has been mentioned, is liable to flooding, and the homes on the opposite side of this property have had some serious problems recently with water flooding their properties. The reduction in permeable surface that would be caused by building on the garden will make this problem worse. The conservators of Epping Forest have voiced their concern, as the property is only 250 metres from the forest, and they feel that increased residential use will have a detrimental effect on local habitats and a reduction in the air quality. It is also only 50 metres from an important conservation area. The proposed development will have an adverse effect on the neighbouring properties, but especially on number 4, where the two-storey houses will have a visual impact and also overshadow the southwest garden of the house next door. And the row of gardens in the street would be abruptly curtailed visually. There will be a significant reduction in the garden of the host house, and the rear of the host house will look out onto a 2-storey blank wall. This is an overdevelopment of a back garden, and it is not just one but 2 2-storey houses on what was a proportionate garden for a house of this size. So finally, this is my views on the application. It will have an adverse effect on the neighbours. There will be a problem with parking and highway safety. The visual impact, design and appearance is not satisfactory. The overdevelopment of the site, which is a back garden of a house. The risk of surface water flooding an area that already has problems with flooding. And the detrimental effect on this SAC and close proximity to the forest and conservation area. I have to say, in my 6 years of sitting on this committee, I think that this is probably the worst example of a proposal to build on a back garden, and I shall not be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Coughlin, do you wish
Thank you, Chair. It's very late, so I'll be brief. I agree with all Councillor Jennings' comments. I question the governance of the officer that put the report forward. It's completely inappropriate development of a garden, and it shouldn't even be before us. And the effect on the neighbours is just outrageous. So why is it even here?
Well, the officer has assessed it, and in his professional opinion, it does meet the criteria. I mean, members may well disagree with that and refuse it, but the officer has done what he had to do in the assessment of the scheme.
Thank you. Councillor Owen. Sorry, I thought you indicated to speak earlier.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't hear my name there. Yeah, Uplands is a beautiful road, and I agree with everything that's been said. A comment was made that this was affordable housing, but I highly doubt any house on the Uplands is going to be affordable for anyone starting out. It's so in keeping with the road. And I also wanted to know, my question though, is what is the SAC contribution? Because it doesn't actually say. It says they're going to sign up to a 106, but there's no figure mentioned.
Yeah, Mr. Rahman will deal with that.
Thank you. The figures are set out in the APMS, the acquisition mitigation strategy. So here it would be £352 per dwelling in terms of the recreational contribution, and £335 per dwelling regarding air quality.
Do you want to come back? Sorry.
Just very quickly, was that £352 per dwelling for 2 houses in a right next to the SAC? Wow.
Regarding the recreational contribution.
Councillor Sunga, did you did.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm looking at the plans here. Perhaps the planning officer can just inform us. 2A is behind number 3 on the. If you look at the plans, so somewhere along the lines, 2A has been built in the back of that garden as well. So, in this particular application, the applicant is seeking to build 2 semi-detached houses. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it says. That's what it says.
I'm finding it very hard how I could support this application based on 2 dwellings. I may have been convinced on 1, but 2 definitely. I think it's going to find a struggle to support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chairman. Just one very brief point. I think if members are minded to approve this, it will send out a very clear signal to anybody in this district, not let alone in Loughton, that if you live on a corner property with a sizable back garden, then 2 or 3 houses are yours for the taking. I think it will be a dreadful precedent. We must refuse this.
Thank you, members. No more indication for speakers. Can we go to the vote? The officer's recommendation is to grant permission subject to legal agreement. All those in favour of that?
0.
All those against?
Councillor Heap. Councillor Heap, I believe you left the... okay.
Sorry.
Unanimous.
Members, that motion did not carry. We need a motion now for refusal. I'm going to kick in. Sorry.
I was going to say the overdevelopment of a site, which is the back garden of a house, the risk the risk of surface water flooding the area that already has problems, the detrimental effect on the SAC, and on the neighbours. Certainly an adverse effect on the neighbours, and the parking and highway. They have 2 car parking spaces per house, but they're going to lose 4 on the street. Sorry.
You need to specify what the harm to the neighbours is, if you're going to do that. There is no technical aspect regarding flooding in the report. I would argue that it would not be able to sustain that reason. So that would be my comment, but if members want to put it in there, it's clearly down to you. But what is the harm to the neighbours?
A loss of amenity, I think. Yeah, Councillor Pond.
I'd suggest the harm to the neighbours is by bringing the living accommodation of the proposed cramped new dwellings into close proximity with their boundary, and therefore the quiet enjoyment of their garden. And there is a considerable evidence of surface water flooding opposite. There's a whole file of material on it, correspondence and Zoom meetings between Thames Water and the Town Council.
Thank you. That is a motion for refusal. Do we have a proposer? Sorry, Councillor Jennings.
Could I just add, setting a dangerous precedent?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
Setting a unwelcome precedent.
Yeah. Members, do we have a proposer and a seconder? Sorry, Councillor Wixley.
All right, I'm back on. I just wonder if the officer would agree that there's a loss of outlook for the neighbouring property with a close proximity of 2 houses. I know we can't object on the grounds of loss of view, but I think we can in terms of outlook.
Thank you.
It's been recorded by Zoom. So
Members, we're now being recorded by Zoom, so can we carry on? Okay, we need Councillor Gabbett before we continue.
Councillor Gabbett coming back.
Can she rejoin the meeting if she's on the phone? It's our fault. I know. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. Members, the meeting will be resumed and is being recorded on Zoom. Item 13, EPF 298620, 98 Westbury Lane. Can we have the officer's report, please?
Pass over to Mr. Rahman.
Thank you, members. This application is for a mixed-use development. So there's an office space proposed at the ground floor level and 2 units above. This is the location plan. So it's to the rear of the existing post office, located over here, and it's accessed via Westbury Lane. This is the existing and proposed site plan. So we have the existing site over here. And to the right, we have the proposed site plan These are the proposed floor plans. So to the left, we have the office space. And there is one car parking space for the office over here. And this is the first floor plan of the 2 units above. So this is 1 unit. And the second unit over here. They both have separate access. So unit flat 1 is accessed via stairway over here. And unit 2 is accessed via the stairway here. These are the existing elevations. So this is the view from Westbury Lane. And these are the 2 flank elevations. And this is the rear of the site. These are the proposed elevations. So it's the office space at the ground floor level. This accessway here is for unit 1 above here. And this doorway here is the accessway for unit 2 above. And we have the undercroft parking space for the office. This is the proposed street scene plan. This is the CGI of the proposed street view. This is an aerial view of the site. The site is located over here. This is from a different angle. So the site's located over here. So this is the view of the parking area to the office space. Top left, the top right is the view from Westbury Lane towards the site. These are further views from Westbury Lane. And some further views over here. So there's been an objection from the parish council and the local neighbour. Concerns are set out in the agenda. The merits of the scheme also set out within the same report. And officers are recommending the scheme for approval, subject to a Section 106 agreement and recommended conditions. Thank you. Over to members.
Thank you. We have one speaker, the applicant's agent, Beth Watts, who I believe is on Zoom. 3 minutes.
Good evening, members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of our application. The proposed replacement of the existing buildings would regenerate the site through the introduction of a new building that will provide functional commercial office floor space and 2 one-bedroom apartments. The existing buildings are at the end of their economic and functional lives and are not suitable or cost-effective for refurbishment or retention. The applicant is looking to relocate their own existing business to the site and will be making a significant economic investment in Buckhurst Hill. The design of the new buildings have been carefully considered in order to take into account a variety of factors, including the form, scale, mass and appearance of surrounding buildings, ensuring that it will appear sympathetic to the character of the area and significantly enhance the appearance of the site. The layout of the new building and positioning of windows have also been carefully considered to ensure that there is no adverse impact upon residential amenity. A high-quality contemporary materials palette is proposed to complement the appearance of the existing buildings in Westbury Lane. The scheme will also incorporate high levels of insulation and water efficiency measures. The development would make good and efficient use of an existing underutilised brownfield site to provide new homes and enhance commercial floor space in a highly sustainable location in close proximity to a wide range of services and facilities with good public transport links. Local planning policies seek to place a strong emphasis on housing development being located within sustainable urban areas such as Buckhurst Hill, in order to avoid placing additional pressures on less other suitable sites, such as those within the Greenbelt and countryside. New residential accommodation will make a positive contribution to the council's housing supply and should be given significant weight. The new homes will provide a good standard of living for future residents in respect of internal space and daylight. The site is within walking distance of outdoor green space, ensuring that residents will also have access to nature, as well as a communal terrace area located to the rear of the building. In order to promote sustainable travel, secure covered cycle storage areas will be provided and a car-free residential development is proposed in order to reduce the reliance on private vehicles. One car parking space will be provided for the proposed office, which will have an electric charging point to encourage the use of a zero-emission vehicle. Overall, it is considered that our proposal fully complies with relevant planning policies, and we respectfully request that your office's recommendation be agreed and that planning permission is granted for this highly sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Patel, I'll follow you after you've had your comments.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm one of the ward councillors for this application site. I think it's refreshing to see an application that's come forward in Buckhurst Hill, which isn't backland development. This section of Westbury Lane is a mismatch, but it has irregular properties along it at that particular point. One of the things I wanted to make clear is, if I can ask Mr. Godden to bring up the slides again, I was able to see one of the proposed flats, but can I see? I couldn't see the other flat.
They're side by side, yeah. Yeah.
I must have missed it. Apologies.
Wow! Don't go back there, please.
So the office space is on the ground floor, and the flats are up on the first floor. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I think I'm actually minded to support this application. I think the design looks fine to me, and as there is no uniformity along the streets, at that particular point, I think it actually enhance that section off the road. I welcome the fact that this is a car-free development as well. Just want to make sure that that's been conditioned. That there won't be the ability for the applicants to apply for parking permits on Westbury Lane.
Well, we can't put a condition on that would require that because it's outside the red line area. That's not a condition that would be enforceable.
Okay, but I still think that a one bedroom flat would benefit the area. I can see a young working professional commuting into London, residing in one of these flats. No, I know.
Councillor Pond.
Chairman, I don't have any great objection to this scheme. But I would make 2 points. One, in respect of what Mr. Godden has just said, when the question of parking permits, which I think Councillor Patel made reasonably, was raised in relation to the Royal Oak development in Loughton, the agreed position of the committee was that you couldn't condition it, but that you could add an informative saying the council has written to the North Essex Parking Partnership asking that permits for the Westbury Road, whatever, BH7 or whatever it is, be not made available to the inhabitants of the premises hereby consented. And the other point that was made, I think the other point that should be made is that there are no permitted development rights relating to commercial premises, but there are permitted development rights relating to C3, and I think we should withdraw all PDR relating to the consented flats.
Thank you, members. I'm conflicted on this one because I know the site well. I accept Councillor Patel's points that there's parts of Westbury Lane that really do need regenerating. They've been like it for years. I like the idea of having the small flats. If we can have the parking restriction, then I think that goes some way to overcoming my objections to this scheme. If we can have, sorry, Councillor Wixley.
Well, if you're going to introduce parking restrictions, I think I've mentioned this before to Mr. Godden, actually, so he'll be familiar with this, but this thing's a suitable case for the residential travel information packs to be issued. So I would ask if that could, if this is approved, that would be an added condition. Again, I think there's inconsistency. Sometimes we recommend them, sometimes we don't.
I can confirm that it's there, it's condition 9.
Yeah, I don't know if you've got that, but Mr. Rahman's saying that it's condition 9 for the residential travel packs. With regard to Councillor Pond's that comment on PD, flats don't have any PD rights, so that wouldn't need to be removed. And we can put an informative on that we would write, or Mr. Rahman would write to the West Essex Partnership.
Councillor Heath.
Thank you, Chairman. I know this site well as well as you. And some of it does need redeveloping. I do think the rooms in this development are tiny, absolutely tiny. I'd much prefer one flat and an office rather than 2, because it just looks, well, ridiculous when you look at where the table is in the flat 2. Can we have that picture back up? So when you come up the stairs, you've got just over a chair width before you get into the table that's there, that's shown. So it's in tiny, tiny flat. And I think that's just a bit mean-spirited.
It's within the requirements. Yeah. It's within the requirements, yeah. I'm not disagreeing at all.
Yes, as far as I'm aware, and Mr. Rahman will correct me if I'm wrong, this does meet the standard requirements.
That's correct. It does meet the National Dispatch State Standards for a 1-2-person unit at 50 square meters.
I can see that there'll be professionals rushing to get this.
Anybody else to speak? Members, can we go to the vote on this application? The officer's recommendation is to grant permission subject to legal agreements. All those in favour, please signify. Against?
0.
Abstentions? Thank you, members. That application has been approved. Moving on swiftly, item 14, EPF 261921, Albany Stud Farm, Epping New Road, Buckhurst Hill.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I get the screen up. Here we go. think that's it. This is an application for a replacement dwelling and associated works, including a security hut and access road. As you can see from the site plan here, the works will be in this area, and a temporary haul road, which is the red road from this entrance here, is proposed as part of this scheme to bring the vehicles necessary to construct and obviously the materials, avoiding the neighbouring properties to the north in this area here and to the west. Aerial photograph shows the site before development of the site, and this is the area that would be redeveloped. Layout of the site, this property is already existing and not part of the site. You see a fairly simple square-shaped property with a garage to the north. The internal layout of the building is shown here with the garages, and then the first floor, and then in the roof, and then in the very roof. The elevational drawings show the scheme of the property, a somewhat traditional type style of design, although modern. This is the previous approval, which is exactly the same scheme from 2017, and this was the 2014 approval, which was considerably a completely different scheme, as you can see. But this is the 2017 approval, which has expired, and then this scheme is basically identical. Members have done a site visit. I think it was carried out 2 weekends ago with Mr. Richardson. So we have received a number of objections to the scheme. 12 and 9 Fernside have noted the need for the site huts as long as it's not used for living accommodation, and the Hall Road, both seen them removed post-construction. Residents at Oak Hall have raised concerns about construction access, and the temporary roads is used for deliveries and not on the main residential access. Parish Councillor Buckerstill have objected and confirmed attendance at the committee to make the following representations. Find it's difficult to comprehend due to the piecemeal applications, existing and proposed drawings are needed. Unable to ascertain the impact on the green belt due to lack of volumetric and cubic capacity report. Temporary road is not necessary for this application, and verified views should be submitted for the application. Conservators of Epping Forest were consulted and have not objected, as is outside commented land. The officer lays out the principles from page 95. There was a previous development there's previous decisions for dwellings on this site, which are material considerations, and established the key points that that apply to this current application. Perhaps the most important one is the acceptance by the council on the previous 2 applications that the land is previously developed as defined in the National Planning Policy Framework, and the replacement development is therefore appropriate development, as long as it doesn't have a significantly greater impact on the openness and character of the greenbelt. As you can see, the officers have looked at the previous sprawl of poor quality buildings, which will be removed, and the overall volume is being reduced by around 8%. While it is accepted the dwellings would be more visible from further field due to their size and mass, it's considered that when you take Dell House and Oak Hall of a similar width with more substantial add-ons, as is laid out in the report, it is considered that this will not have an adverse impact, will not have a significantly greater impact on the green belt than was previously considered acceptable. The design is considered to be acceptable under a kind of fairly traditional type of view, certainly as opposed to the 2014 application. The temporary works there is a debate to be had whether they would be permitted or not, but in this case they are part of the application, so do fall to be considered, and officers are happy that the Hall Road would be a sensible way forward on this site, and it can be conditioned to be removed once the occupation of the new house has commenced. And the SAC matters are laid out as in the report, but it doesn't result in any change to the existing approved position. So the conclusion there is that this amounts basically to a renewal of the previous permission for a dwelling, on proposing the same building in the same location with few amenity concerns. The temporary Hall Road and construction hut can be conditioned to be removed and would make sense to do so. The proposal therefore complies with policy and it is recommended for approval.
Thank you. Unfortunately, as one of the ward members, I was very keen to go on site visit, but I was out of the country. So I'd like to hear from somebody that was on the site visit if they would like to say something. Oh, sorry. You've been sitting there so patiently and I almost ignored you. I do apologise. We have one speaker, the applicant's agent, Andrew Riley. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I won't take up all my 3-minute quota, so you'll be able to move on shortly. I just want to reiterate some of the points that the officer has made. I think the planning history of the site is very pertinent to the assessment of the current application. As was set out, there was an application in 2014. That application approved the removal of all of the buildings that were on that part of this site. Those buildings were a collection of 1, 2 and 2.5 story buildings over a much wider footprint and a much wider area, and included essentially equestrian buildings related to the equestrian use of the site, but also 2 dwellings as well. There were 2 flats within that collection of buildings. That planning application was granted by this planning committee. A separate application came before you in late 2017. That was for, again, the demolition of those on-site buildings and replacement with a new dwelling based on the plans and the elevations that we've just saw before you. There was also then a separate application for a new stable block, which has subsequently been implemented. Whilst works on that previous planning commission for the new dwelling were commenced, various conditions were discharged and the buildings were demolished, as the members that went on site would have seen, for various reasons, not least among them sort of COVID and just the general delays that occurred there. The works kind of stopped at the demolition phase. The application before you, in terms of the new dwelling, is identical to the permission that was granted in it was actually early 2018, January 2018. The footprint is the same, the elevations are the same, the size of the building is the same. It is essentially, as the officer said, a renewal of that permission. In comparison to those buildings that were on site, it is smaller than those buildings in terms of the volume. So I think that can allay the concerns that have been raised by the parish council. And really the only differences between that consented scheme and the one before you are actually the inclusion of this temporary access road and the temporary security hut. And we feel on the applicant's side actually that they are sensible inclusions to help mitigate the or even avoid the impact on the neighbouring properties through the construction of the developments. There's been no objection from the council's tree officer, contaminated land, drainage and highways, and therefore we agree with the officer's recommendation that it's a scheme that meets the council's policies in terms of greenbelt design, amenity and transport. And so I'd respectfully request that you support the officer's recommendation and grant planning permission. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chairman. I have absolutely no objection against the actual development itself. My concern is really around the road, the temporary road that's going to be created, because you're going to have heavy goods vehicles travelling along there, so it's going to have to be built to a certain standard to take the pressure from these vehicles. I mean, I personally would like to see it removed afterwards.
It's conditioned to
so it has been conditioned, and the barn as well, and sorry, the site huts as well will be.
And the hut within 1 month of first occupation.
Okay, that's fine. Well, in that case, I'll be supporting this application.
Thank you, Councillor Heath.
Thank you. I still have a problem with the road. I don't think it's necessary. One of the things I do as part of my job is a lot of work on site for festivals and stuff like that. And you can get stuff called trackway, which you lay down, you hire it, you lay it down, you drive on it, you lift it up. You don't need to pour a load of concrete. I'm a big fan of concrete, but every year, 1.5 cubic meters per person alive on this planet is used to make stuff, and that's a waste of concrete. So I think if you would invest in trackway, I'd be much happy with it. I don't object to the house.
Councillor Wixley.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I did go to the site visit and found it very interesting, informative. Just to clarify, I did ask a couple of questions at the site visit. One was, I think I've understood it correct, how this compares with the the footprint of the previous buildings are there, if that's reduced. And I also asked how it compared regarding the height. So there are a couple of questions that I had. I also, I don't know if the officer could go back to the picture of the building, if you could get that up again. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I did raise an issue regarding that building, which caused some amusement at the time, but it was said that I could suggest an extra condition. One thing which I'm concerned about is the number of chimneys there and the risk of birds getting stuck in them and falling down. I've had experience of this in my lifetime, and I think we should be conscious of looking after wildlife. And now, although that caused some amusement, it was then a little short while afterwards pointed out that the nearby Dell Hall, I think that's, yes, Dell Hall, actually had the cowlings on top of the chimneys to prevent birds falling down. So I rest my case because there seems to be perhaps a history of birds getting stuck in chimneys, and hence these cowlings which are put on, and there's quite a lot of chimney pots there actually, so it's quite a bit of scope for birds to fall down there. So it might be an unusual condition, but I hope that that could be done and members would be supportive of that.
Thank you.
Sorry, Kate, I think you said you asked a couple of questions on site, and I think one of them was about the height of the building, and the new building will be 800 millimetres higher than the previous dwelling on site. Was there another question?
Can we condition the chimneys?
Oh, no, not the chimney. Yes, where is it? The volume of it's an 8% reduction. The previous building was 4,613 cubic metres, and this will be 4,315 cubic metres.
Councillor Pond. Sorry, you want to come? Sorry, Councillor Wixley wants to come back. Apologies.
Somebody got, oh yeah. I'm just wondering if I've got support for the cowling on the chimneys, that's all.
I'm not sure it's a planning matter, it's more a housekeeping matter for the homeowner. But
I was told it could be perhaps added as a condition.
It wouldn't be enforceable. Realistically, it wouldn't be proportionate or expedient to do that. I mean, I don't think I've ever had that condition anywhere, ever.
Councillor Pond, thank you.
Well, Chairman, you asked for a brief report on the site visit. I do think it was extremely illuminating because the openness of the green belt at this point is striking. You can see the rooftops of Starling Close and the other nearby streets, but otherwise you could be in the middle of the country. I thought the openness of the green belt would be impaired by this development, but I don't think it would be impaired significantly to warrant a refusal. This site, incidentally, was originally the stables and greenhouses for the Victorian mansion, Oak Hall, which was built on the same site as the current modern Oak Hall. And there was an application to legitimise the use of the pre-act buildings as a stud for horse breeding in the 1950s, which was agreed because it was an agricultural use. There were, as the agent said, residential flats for a couple of staff. I think all that is in the past because that's been superseded by the consents given ill-advisedly, in my view, in 2014 and perhaps better advisedly in 2017. Don't have any great objection to the design. I think it's done well. It is a mansion rather than a house, but then there are several around, and so I'm not intending to move a motion to refuse this one.
Councillor Heap, I believe you want to come back.
Yeah, it's just a question about the road, because we have a 3-year start date for any permission that's given, but the end, it could be any time, couldn't it? It could be 20 years. As long as the house isn't finished and occupied, the road will stay. Is there any way we can actually put a time limit on the road being removed.
It is conditioned for
No,
one
no, no,
month
but that's when it's occupied.
after
So if the house is just semi-built, the road stays for as long as that happens.
Yes, you are correct. We can't force people to complete their houses if they stop building halfway through, and you'll be aware that there's been a number of those cases in the district over the last few years, and they're basically a nightmare for us because we can't do much to force the person to do it. However, if we've got a half-built house there, I'd possibly suggest that will be the greater problem than the Hall Road. But realistically, there is nothing we could do to deal with that.
Members, we have the officer's recommendation to grant with conditions. All those in favour of that, please show.
For.
Against? And abstentions?
3.
Thank you, members. That application has been granted. We go to item 15, exclusion of public and press.
No.
Thank you, members, for your patience this evening. Good night. Safe journey home. Thank you.